welcome in here. You've got Neil Metzler from Omnisent Sports. I'm here with Will Martin from the VANT Network. We're going to be hanging out, talking about the NCAA tournaments, men's and women's. And we have a special surprise for you tuning in. If you are curious about an unusual way to make picks, a very novel, interesting way to make picks using artificial intelligence, we have a playoff for you. We are featuring vibes versus stats, stats versus vibes. So you're going to see how we built these AI models, exactly what we got right, and hilariously what we got wrong. And hope you're going to enjoy this. So grab a cup of coffee, grab a cup of tea, or a cold beverage, and pull up a chair while we talk about vibes versus stats. All right, Will, how are you doing today?
Yeah, doing good. Models have been interesting putting together. Games have been awesome to kind of watch. Lots of excitement and drama. So yeah, excited to get into this.
Yeah. So, Will, you've been in sports podcasting and the sports betting industry for a couple of years. I know you and I met at a couple of conferences globally. Just tell me why you are so passionate about sports, first of all, before we get into the tech and the business side.
Yeah, I've always been into sports, going back way back to when I was a child, and yeah, being from Ireland, like any kind of sport kind of goes really. Obviously, we've got our own native Irish sports, but then are part of the fan base on global sports. And obviously, we're talking about March Madness here. Actually, can we say that? Do I have to delete that? At the NCAA men's tournament, but not too big of a fan base over here, but I spent a bit of time in the US for university and kind of got into it while I was there, and think it's one of the best kind of tournaments because straight knockout tournaments are few and far between. Usually there's lots of kind of drawn out league portions and stuff like that, whereas the drama of straight knockout with 64 teams involved, it really kind of puts everything up to 11. So I love being kind of part of that. And yeah, if you love sports and can try and make a job in it, then I think that's a win-win.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can relate to that too. I worked in corporate and big tech for 10, 15 years, and I got to play with a lot of tools around data analytics and artificial intelligence, including things like trend detection for fashion. And I was like, well, what I'm passionate about is sports. So I built a passion project tracking public vibes about my favorite teams, my hometown team, Seattle Seahawks head coach at the time, which was Pete Carroll. And I got into this because we had a huge controversy in the fan base around keep the legendary coach or stick with Russell Wilson, the star quarterback, and let Russ cook. And this was a tumultuous time. I was listening to a lot of podcasts, but I wanted to take a data-driven approach to understand, hey, how do the fans, the every fan out there actually feel about this? And so I founded Omnisent Sports to basically aggregate and analyze millions of public comments, not from your Shannon Sharps only, not from your most followed accounts, but really throughout the sports ecosystem in order to understand how emotion, attention are functioning at scale for the sports industry.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, the wisdom of the crowds is kind of what got me into more of the data-driven stuff. Con 101, everybody's got an opinion, the kind of putting them all together and kind of spitting something at the other end gives you a better result than any one opinion. Because yeah, you're right. The bigger accounts or the pundits that are on TV carry a lot of weight. That might not be representative of the larger fan base, or might not be more accurate than the fan base at large. But yeah, fan bases have a tendency to overreact to certain things given the emotional investment involved as well. So yeah, using data is a great way to kind of clean out some of the noise and hopefully be left with a nice signal. And I guess we can kind of dive into the signals or the noise that we found so far in March Madness.
Absolutely. And I wanted to acknowledge, you mentioned your economics view. You've been into prediction markets before prediction markets were prediction markets, before they were cool, before they were all over the front page of the news. So yeah, I wanted to invite you to first show and tell with us your March Madness model and kind of how it relates to the work that you and the VANT Network do for markets. And so I'm going to show here on screen a bit about how the first rounds are going. We're recording on Wednesday, March 25th. So we're through and awaiting the round of 16 upcoming. Yeah. So there's a lot of data that we're going to dive into in a moment, but Will, sharing here on screen for those of you with us on video, like what was your mental approach? What was your philosophy when it came to, okay, I'm going to build a data-driven bracket that
Hmm.
emphasizes the power of stats?
Yeah. So a few years ago, started participating in the Kaggle kind of tournaments, which they've
Yeah.
huge data sets before a single ball has been thrown, and people compete, data scientists compete based on that to pick the best bracket. Still, I don't think anybody's ever completed a full bracket. Hence why there's big kind of promos where they're
Yeah.
giving away lots and lots of money if you get a perfect tournament, because they know almost for sure it's never actually going to happen. So that was kind of my first kind of foray into using data to try and beat the market essentially. And so kind of putting that economics and computer science hat back on to see, is there edge in the data? But what we've kind of seen this year hasn't been as impressive as previous years. Looks like the markets are getting sharper, or the games are becoming more predictable, or there's a kind of a rising talent into those kind of top teams. So there's been far fewer upsets this year. It's not like there hasn't been any upsets, but it's probably some of the variance has been kind of taken out compared to previous years. So yeah, the whole philosophy was using stats from regular season, and I guess college basketball is quite unique in that there's so many different divisions, and the strength of the divisions are quite different. So just because you're ranked number one nationally on one metric, if you're playing against a bunch of teams that aren't pretty good, then that doesn't really mean a whole lot. So it's kind of filter out that noise as well, which can be quite difficult as well, because there's so many games in this tournament, but there's also so many games in the regular season. So the whole philosophy is trying to figure out where there's mismatches, and there's kind of 5 or 6 that we've kind of identified as being potential kind of game-winning stats to kind of focus on. Offensive rebounds has been a big one from previous seasons. Doesn't seem to have had that same kind of impact. It has in some games, but not as a overall one stat to rule them all that could give you that edge. So yeah, it's looking for value as much as anything else. As you see, like the accuracy of the market is pretty good. 78% is what we found as being the winning kind of percentage, just going on a pure market play. So it's quite hard to beat that when they're hitting it almost at an 80% clip. But yeah, some of the more interesting ones then are finding out some of the kind of finer details and the stats that can kind of flip the script a little bit.
Yeah, it's a great point about the markets getting sharper over time, because this tournament, it's seasonal. It happens once per year. It's not every 4 years.
Yep.
And although the teams and the rosters are new, there is a very entrenched industry of analysts and media and marketing and massive budget, billion-dollar budgets around this. So in terms of how well covered the men's side is, I think we can agree that empirically it's a very well covered bracket. And the women's is a different story, and we're excited to see the growth of the women's game, the recognition and the investment that women's sports are getting in the U.S. globally. Without mention to folks like Angel Reese, Caitlin Clark as well, having that star power emerge in the Instagram era, which is so important. But yeah, you mentioned markets being priced efficiently. That seems to be a bit of the case here. And we only have 1 year of data to look at. So talk to me a bit about, one of the callouts was fewer upsets than anticipated, or fewer upsets than historically there.
Yeah.
Did that kind of mess with your model a bit?
Yeah, definitely it messed with it. And just one point on the markets potentially being sharper in pricing. With prediction markets kind of going mainstream, there's a lot of institutional money kind of coming in. So it's not bookmakers and people that like playing the lines that are just the only participants that are crafting the lines. It's now institutional money. So quants and traders from Wall Street or Canary Wharf in London are now
Yeah.
potentially looking at this. So putting huge resources and experience and the amount of data that's available and the compute power that's available to you and me as humble little
Yeah.
startups. You can imagine big kind of financial institutions or books, what they're able to afford and what they're able to process. So yeah, I think when I was looking at the stats from last year and the year before, there was 11 and 7 upsets in round one, whereas this year there was only 5. So when you're going looking for value and there's only 5 upsets, your opportunities start kind of closing in a little bit because there is such a high win rate of, the favorites kind of coming through. So that is potentially one of the kind of mismatches from previous seasons. So in 2024, the models that we worked on were producing about a 60% win rate, which is pretty good for a 50-50 shout in terms of money line or against the spread or overs and unders. Last year was even better. It was about a 64%, but right now it's a losing stat. So obviously hope that we can take the data that's kind of gone before in round 1 or 2, push that back into the models and see if from the round of 16 on, the model can perform a little bit better. But if it does perform a little bit better, I'd imagine the odds are probably going to be that little bit worse, that we're kind of reverting to what the market is saying, which is kind of hard to beat the market when the market seems to be winning at a greater rate than in previous seasons.
It's a great point as well about pre-tournament versus mid-tournament decisions, right? Because in the office, when I was in Seattle and we played, you pencil in your bracket, you hand in your bracket to who you're with in the office. You can't change it mid-flight.
Right.
You can't change it mid-flight. But for traders, casual punters, as well as institutional investors, every tip, every moment of play, every press conference, and actually all of the social media reaction can be priced into those models. So yeah, we've seen some major shifts that we'll get to in the second half on our show and tell as well. But I think that's a great point you made about pre versus mid-flight, as well as institutional. The speed of trading now is so different. It's not just I need to pick up the phone and call my bookie in New Jersey or Vegas or what have you. Yeah, it's really different now.
Yeah. No, these prediction markets, sports books, betting exchanges, they're all starting to mirror financial markets where things are moving rapidly and everyone has access to the same information and things are becoming more open and transparent, and things are becoming sharper as a result. That the mismatch of old seems to be kind of narrowing, or maybe this is just a once-off. And the one thing I always tell people is you got to remember that these are college students. Putting your expectations on college students is a bit of a big ask, that some of these guys are 18, 19, 20 years old.
For sure.
The spotlight is pretty hot. So it's not unheard of for people to not kind of perform in those environments. Time will tell, and that's why people love sports, right? That you just don't know what's going to happen, which is awesome.
Will, tell me, yeah, that's absolutely one of the best parts about the college sports game that I think we all hope remains that way as well. Brilliant. So can you just tell us what we're looking at here? I'm seeing that these data largely line up across all of the books and what does this mean, well calibrated?
Yeah, it just means that we kind of looked at some of the books you have here on screen. What were they kind of saying in terms of their favorite odds for the favorite versus how it actually kind of performed. And, the main kind of takeaway for me is that all these books are pretty much moving in line with one another. Might be a percentage point here or there that might be different, and that might be just the state of their book. These are all US based books because, we tried to get European data, but there's not huge amounts of volumes kind of going on compared to the US. So we just said we go with the US books, just given the amount of volume that they would have, because there's a lot more interesting data from there. But they all kind of move in similar ways. And the differential might be they might have different exposure based on which states they're available in. That hometown favorite might kind of skew the odds one way or the other. But it looks like they're all pretty well calibrated. They're all about 76 to a 79% win rate. So for the favorites, so that's pretty damn good. Yeah, there's not too much edge that they're kind of giving up. So yeah, we'll see if that continues.
Super interesting data. So I want to give you a chance, Will, to speak to some of the calls that this model did get right, this version. And as we, as builders, know, these are always point in time snapshots. We're always feeding the model, tweaking, tuning differently. So we've only got 1 year of data. I think we set up the rules for vibes versus stats. I think we had like a gentleman's agreement. We weren't going to do like 20 years of historical data crunching and go totally nuts on Kaggle. Things we could have done, but we're both busy founders, and we decided to gentleman's agreement, fair play on that.
Yeah,
So
yeah, it's
yeah,
a good word of warning that this is like a little side project because it's both
yeah,
related to what we're doing in our full-time jobs, and it's interesting and kind of scratches an itch.
yeah.
And I guess the little sneak preview is this is potentially something that we could learn from ahead of the World Cup, because big tournaments like that with lots of games coming thick and fast, it's been great for us to kind of prepare ourselves mentally, physically, model-wise, data-wise, for those kind of big tournaments.
There you go. There you go. And just to kind of hook listeners a little bit, I think Will and we're considering a friendly company to company competition, putting $100 on our World Cup models potentially, and then sharing those results. And Will, I think that we should put any winnings towards charity, and like the
Yeah,
winner, maybe charity of their choice. I think that'd be a lot of fun.
yeah, no, it's a
Awesome.
great way to gamify it.
Yeah. So you mentioned offensive rebounds, and
Hmm.
so I wanted to zoom in here because in the Miami, Ohio win right here, 10 points. It was a 7.5 spread going on here. What did you see from the stats that really that helped the model kind of nail this and get this right?
Yeah, and this is one that just kind of flashing red upset alert, because I actually ended up personally taking the money line on this as well, and they were like a 4-1 chance because they were
Okay.
getting 7.5 points, but they ended up winning by 10 points. So they covered by 17.5 points, which is this happened as part of the first four, so I was like, okay, this could be a super interesting tournament. Lots of kind of upsets in the first four. But unfortunately, that didn't kind of play out across the rest of the games. The offensive rebounds, Miami were kind of showing kind of first nationally there. And again, when you have different divisions,
Yeah.
you're never sure if that will stack up, because I think where the market was kind of coming from is that Miami Ohio are playing in a weaker conference than SMU, so they didn't
Mm-hmm.
see that kind of translating. Obviously, the models that we kind of build, they're kind of a bit ignorant to some of that, kind of market data
Yeah.
and sentiment, and that probably goes to your kind of vibes as well, because you'll have people slating certain conferences, but the model doesn't know. So yeah, the offensive rebound was something that we've picked up on from last year and the season before. And for those not familiar with basketball, offensive rebound means your team is taking a shot, it's bounced off the rim or the glass, but your team is kind of picking up that second ball, giving you an extra look to potentially get another shot away, work maybe another 3-pointer, or potentially get a foul, so you're going to the free throw line. And if a team can do that and convert those points, it could be really the difference maker. And that's what we saw here in that first game. So they were also pretty good defensively, Miami, Ohio. So we kind of saw that kind of mismatch. That's the kind of reason that the model kind of screamed, this is a potential upset here.
I love it. And you connected offensive rebounds here to extra possessions, which across sports in the analytics space is increasingly a point of measurement, point of focus. I know, for example, in NFL, American football, having more possessions or stretching possessions out has led to coaches going for it more on fourth down to try to steal an extra possession, because the analytics say that, you're going to produce more points per game
Yeah.
that way. It's very important.
Yeah, same goes with soccer with the high press. It's a big thing that teams
Mm.
are kind of looking for, because they're looking to dominate that possession. And if you can dominate in offensive areas for you, you're just kind of giving yourselves more opportunities to score, which, hopefully that's what all teams are out there to do, and not just hold on to possession for the sake of it. But yeah, it's a super interesting one.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So we've got a few more examples here. Let me know which one you'd most like to talk about. We had Siena, St. John's over Kansas. Yeah, those are the other two here.
Yeah, I have another one here, but yeah, let's go to that Siena Duke game.
Sure.
I always get terrified when there's such big spreads. Once you go over like 20 points, it
Whoa.
becomes kind of difficult to see, because the model might be dead right in taking the points or taking the favorite, but then you just kind of got to watch the kind of game script to see how that kind of plays out. Because Siena ended up covering by 21.5 points, which I don't think anybody saw coming. They were leading at halftime. Even a few minutes into the second half, it took a while for Duke to kind of really get their well-oiled machine actually up and running. They've been the favorite to win it all, which again that kind of pressure nationally can be tough to kind of perform against. So yeah, the model kind of went with Siena. There were 16 ranked up against everybody's favorite to win it all. The kind of mismatch here again kind of comes down to defensive rebounds. So it's kind of the flip of that script that the model was kind of saying that they perform really well on rebounds, which doesn't give Duke that opportunity for those additional points or getting to the free throw line, which is kind of an interesting one because defensive and offensive rebounds are an important part of the game. The model kind of picked up that it would be difficult for Duke to kind of gain that kind of distance, and that's kind of what we saw kind of play out here. Yeah, just what you're highlighting there. The model said it was going to be Duke by 13. So even the model was kind of a bit kinder to Duke than what actually happened.
That's really interesting. You talked about these spreads over 20.
Mm-hmm.
The college game and the tournament it's known for being unpredictable, or there for being sudden shifts, upsets, major comebacks, things like that. So I think it's interesting that you zoomed in and the model found something in that defensive rebounding aspect where the market priced a blowout, but the model priced a real game, two slow teams producing fewer possessions, and then it kind of went through this logic loop. Slow teams, fewer possessions, smaller margins, and then the defensive profile of Siena with elite defensive rebounding, getting into some of the more the analytics there.
Mm-hmm.
The spread was structurally indefensible. So I like how this lines up in terms of logic with the first pick as well. You talked about structural value play
Mm-hmm.
with Miami, Ohio. So I like seeing that consistency in this year's model. Nice work,
Yeah,
man.
yeah. The only other one then from the first round that was really interesting on, I think it was day one, was High Point versus Wisconsin. So High Point were a 10-point underdog. They ended up winning by, I think a single point in the end. So I was kind of dreading that it would go to overtime and then everything would be a bust. But again, the market kind of had implied 71% for Wisconsin. The model kind of spat out at 51, so it was pretty much a coin toss. Big kind of divergence there of what the market was implying versus what our model was implying. So yeah, we took High Point plus 10 points. Yeah.
Yeah, and they eked it out. They squeezed it out 83 to 82, pulling the upset. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, no, it was a crazy game to watch. It was it could have went either way towards the end. The kind of offensive ranking for High Point looked pretty good, and again kind of comes down to people not giving credit to certain conferences and overvaluing other ones. So yeah, that was the main one there.
Throwing shade. Shots fired here, Wisconsin. Sorry, Badgers fans. Yeah,
Well,
Will,
I'm a
the
Minnesota
numbers don't
Vikings
lie.
fan, so yeah, I guess I
Yeah.
do like cheese, but
Yeah.
I guess I'm predetermined not to like Wisconsin.
No, I've been to a Badgers football game. Amazing tailgate, great
Nice.
atmosphere. Would gladly go again. Got to see a future Hall of Famer play at left tackle in his college
Awesome.
game,
That's
Joe
awesome.
Thomas. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, just rounding it out. So St. John's defeating Kansas. I think this is one that got a lot of national attention.
Mm-hmm.
Kansas. Well, I don't want to spill the beans, but yeah, we had some things to say about Kansas as well in ours. So how did your model construct the pick here? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, even before the tournament, we saw a lot of action kind of coming in on St. John's to win the whole thing. They did pretty well in their own kind of division or conference. So we kind of saw a big movement on the market from them to win it outright from about 100 to 1 into 51, which is kind of crazy action. Obviously, probably doesn't take a lot of money coming in to move those lines, just given that there's potentially huge exposure from the book. So they might kind of overcorrect a little bit. But yeah, the defensive rating looked pretty good for St. John's. The offensive ranking from Kansas hasn't been as good as they have been in previous seasons. So we kind of saw that there might be a potential mismatch, bit of extra value. And there were, I think it was a fifth versus sixth seed ranking, or maybe fourth versus fifth. So it looked like pretty much a coin toss. It was going on Kansas. Model kind of suggested a smaller, tighter game than that. So we kind of took St. John's on that. And yeah, a lot of these kind of come down to pace as well. That's another one that we kind of picked up on, and who actually gets to control that pace, because you might have a slow team versus a quick team, but what actually happens on the court on any given day. And that becomes quite hard to kind of map out, of who's actually going to get to dictate the speed of possession. And is it going to be, sideline to sideline, or is it going to be a kind of possession game, kind of going to a soccer analogy here? Is it going to be kind of a Pep Guardiola style of passing around, looking for the good luck to make the open space, or are people driving into the paint looking to, just dominate people kind of early and just kind of go with the speed and look to get fouled and get in those and one kind of scoring positions. So St. John's were 47th kind of nationally in terms of possessions per game. Kansas were 178th. So obviously what happened here was, St. John's were able to kind of dictate that kind of pace of play more than Kansas were able to kind of slow it down and be more comfortable in their own situations. We'll see if those people that kind of came in late on St. John's to win it all will be successful, or if it was just pure vibes.
Love it. We're all about the vibes. So I wanted to ask, staying with my stats hat on here for a sec, this stood out to me. So St. John's, what is the defensive DRT and ORT offensive?
Just defensive rating.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's kind of a composite index of all their number of possessions they have, how many free throw attempts they have, what's their percentage from the free throw, 2 points, 2-point conversion, 3 points, 3-point conversion, then kind of spat out into one single number to kind of be able to match up and do an apples to apples. But it's not pure apples to apples when people are playing against different schools and different teams. So it's not a bulletproof ranking. So yeah, that's kind of how it works.
No, I love it. I mean, so if I was, in Vegas having a beer at the sports book, as we need to do, in our
lock it down
for business development purposes strictly, and you and I were sitting at the bar, and you showed me these advanced metrics, and you're like, hey Neil, St. John's is a top 10 defense, and Kansas is 156th offense by certain advanced metrics, plus the pace of the game. This is creating real issues. It was already from the markets supposed to be pretty close, and I would be interested to potentially take a contrarian pick there and then go with St. John's. So really good job excavating those kind of key matchups and mismatches for the model.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. The market kind of moved more and more towards St. John's from when those lines kind of first came out. So maybe it was the vibes, maybe it was the big kind of fan base kind of getting involved that moved the market for them to win it outright. Kind of came in on that, or were people kind of finding similar kind of stats? Because they kind of performed pretty well in their opening game.
Well, let's take a quick break. I'm going to get ready. We're going to switch seats here, and we're going to take a look at what the vibes told us, what we got right, what we missed from the Omnisent side. So I'm here with Will Martin. Will, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. Nice, dude. Okay, cool. So I will just give us a little edit break.